Who else the truth?
Okay, let me just put this in here. Weakness. Let me see if there's another question. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, weakness. Brett Forney says, different subject, but still about them. I'm trying to figure out the source of these fires. Are they natural? If not, who would it benefit if they were unnatural?
You already know, and most people already know the real politics that's been operative, that they are known as directed energy weapons. This is why you will see some trees burning from the inside out. You'll see in certain areas, particularly in Khalifa's land area, where you see whole areas burned up and the bodies of car metal melting, turning white, and as an example, cast wheels of cars melting with plastic trash cans right near the car that didn't burn. And you'll see certain bushes next to houses that didn't burn. That's directed energy weapons. It's a known fact.
And of course, the storms that we just and flooding
Same
we
thing.
just experienced over in this area.
They've been doing that since the 40s. Those are called seeding.
Seeding,
Seeding, yes.
seeding the clouds.
Seeding,
and
yes,
okay.
yes.
But it's not just that stuff. There's also been earthquakes, underwater earthquakes to cause tsunamis and earthquakes.
Directed energy weapons and rods of God.
Right. Yeah, look up that.
They're not new technologies, old technology. And as a matter of fact, for those of you who really know some of the old technologies of humanity on the earth, those of you, you can find some of that information in the Bhagavad Gita. The rods of God that you see today is ancient even back to them.
Yeah.
So don't see the fact that they have miseducated people, particularly at North America, have these people thinking that a lot of technologies that are being used now are modern technology, and actually it's ancient. It's just that the masses have been kept dumb as relative to what has really been going on. Like you see your flat screen TVs as an example that you have now today. They were using them in the 30s among themselves. Nothing's new. Portable phones that you have your handheld phones now, right? Uncorded, 1800s.
Earlier, you see.
They were earlier, but I'm just saying, as the hybrids have been using them here in North America, but they've been kept among the priesthood and members of the Circle Church and Chancery. This is another reason why they've had an upper hand on you, because they've been hiding technology from you. And when some of it slips out, they pretend to you that it's a new invention and it's old African technology. And so and this is another problem that the people have who really don't know about the walk of man on earth. When they think ancient Africa and ancient Hikupta, or what you call Egypt, Saba, they keep thinking just on the east side. They're not thinking North, Central, South America, and the entire planet, which is what they should be thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're talking ancient Egypt and you're not thinking lower Kentucky and Tennessee and the Grand Canyon, your concepts are wrong.
Here's the question from O'Day L. Have you heard about what Romano Didulo is doing in Canada, i.e. claiming to be the new queen and chief commander of Canada, and your thoughts on that?
I'm not up on that in detail, but in principle, I comprehend it. Because what's happening is indigenous people around the world have what you call superior right to any colonial claim. And many people are starting to exercise that right. And I suggest to all of you, start thinking in that direction, because the right is already with you. However, when doing it, do it with competence.
Anyone who, I'm just responding to a question. If you purchased a flash drive a couple of years ago, yes, it definitely has been updated since then.
Yes, it's been updated. Yeah.
Close to 800 documents on there now. So I would say, if you got one 2 years ago, you were missing a lot of information that we've updated with. Okay, here's a question from Artis Upchurch. How can you protect your pension and Social Security benefits, or not to pay taxes on your income?
Hold on. First of all, let me answer your question by going back to the issue of grammar and language. Income, the word income, applies to foreign corporate operation in a foreign jurisdiction and does not apply to any principal investment whatsoever, but applies only to the profits generated by principal investment by a corporate entity and not a living man or woman. Your wages or compensation, pecuniary compensation received for work or labor are not income. If you say it's income, you've just misclassified yourself, and therefore, just like the adhesion contract that they trick people, you're treated as a foreign corporate entity, not a living man or woman, and thus are taxable. And so income tax is for a corporate dead entity doing business in a foreign jurisdiction.
But isn't that why they're trying to turn us into all caps?
No, they're not turning us. They're presenting.
They're presenting us,
but it doesn't turn you.
Right. But no, well, presenting us as all caps.
So therefore, you must rebut. There's back to public notice. This is back to proclamation.
I do not.
This is how you can't see. They keep presenting you as a non-begear straw. You must rebut it. This is where, particularly across North America, because the military operations for the Pope of Rome is launched particularly under the United States colony corporation operations, which would include Canada, but the head spear is the United States Corporation Company. You must rebut. It can't be emphasized enough. See, everything, I want you all to also go to your law books and look up and read thoroughly the word abandonment. You will find, when you go, as an example, if you go into targeted communities where they so-called gentrify, like our people are always talking about, they gentrified our communities when my grandmom used to have 2 houses and we should have had a house, etc. And the city of this and the city of that and the city of that, the other, came in and gentrified our community. And now I'm living in an apartment that I can't afford when I should have had a house.
That was paid for.
If you start going into the congressional records, you start going into the city records and the clerk's records, you will see that all these so-called foreclosures would be listed under the word abandonment.
Right.
It's back to the issue of estate, and it's cheating of estate. Back to the subject matter and the title of this issue that we're talking about tonight. You're not going to be, it's sort of like getting our people to stop falling for the misdirected argument of race and prejudice that has been promoted as an engineering tool. The issue is birthright theft. The issue is cheating the people's estate. The issue is that human people, have been set as surety to back the private U.S. corporation debt under wardship tenures. That is exactly the operation. Start rebutting them by doing writs of reversion of estate. Nationalization is a reversionary statement. It absolutely is. Why do you think a lot of people, even people on our side, or claim to be so-called conscious community, avoid really getting into the details of what nationalization means and what it impairs? We're not talking about opinion. We're talking about research, because it's a reversion of a state. It kills U.S. Treasury bonds. They don't want you to know you have that power.
But if everybody's not, say, sending their
you give notice.
No, if they're not putting their notice out to like those 7 locations, but they're
that's only a sample. That's the only sample. And the reason that was done is to kick off a response. It was a chess move.
Was it to let them know that we were awakened to the fact?
It's a chess move, and it was killing bonds.
How did it kill bonds?
As soon as you put, this is what you call law of right of inheritance or claim of estate. When an heir or beneficiary of an estate, and keep in mind, the United States Trading Company is operating as a FOFR or trustee. It is a trust. They are subsidiary operations of what is known as the Global World Trust, operating by the popes of Rome, where all these clergy over these years have been claiming souls for the clerk for the Pope under the guise of saving souls.
For the Lord.
Savings for the lords of London, who are the middlemen. That's the Circle Church and Chancery. The lords that everybody's been talking about is the Circle Church and Chancery. Fleet Street, England. This is not unknown. We've been telling people this for years. Whether they accept that fact or not, we've been telling them that. Once you start making statements publicly and start to instrument any instrumentality, I don't care how basic it is, long as it's basically clear and understandable that you're saying by your actions, by your words, that I am not a U.S. citizen, that I'm not a 14th Amendment citizen, that I'm not a Negro, black, or colored, that I'm more, that I'm Aboriginal. When you make statements like that and start doing your business accordingly, it kills the bond. They will never allow you to catch or capture the straw man, which is a false promise that was put out there, whether you deal with UCC 3 statements or UCC 9 financial statements. That was a promise to divert people from the fact that as soon as you start talking like this, you kill the bond. They don't want you to know you have that power. They want you to think that you want to capture the straw man and become holder in due course, which they will never allow to happen. They will never allow to happen.
Where is the original?
With its allonges.
Right, it's got attachments.
All right, let's make this very clear to everyone. When you see people talking about becoming holder in due course by issuing a writ to the Transportation Department, as an example, or HMOs, or financial statements, or birth certificate, or marriage certificate, or any other bottomry instrument issued under the jurisdiction of the United States Corporation Company, and that you're going to become holder in due course by going through commercial processes of that's why it's called commerce. Commerce means trade, human trade trafficking, etc., which is distinct from a right claimed unalienable, because all these are alienable instrumentalities, with the promise that you're going to capture the straw man and then become holder in due course and then become executor over the estate and then have access to this bottomless pit of finance, which is what they've been promising people. Remember this law. If one has not the original instrument with all allonges attached, that would be the record of trade with it. So that means an allonge would be all of the trade instruments, the record of all the trades with all of the movements on the CUSIC number that's also on that marriage certificate, on that Social Security, which would be attached to it, which would literally be a book on everyone. You know daggone well, even when people so-called claim the so-called birth certificate, nobody talks about allonges, do they?
No.
Of course not. Do you think they're going to talk about allonges, or do you think they're going to have these people running in circle for 2 or 3 years, which buys them time. Look how many people you see running in circles trying to capture that birth certificate. How many people can you count on both hands that captured the birth certificate and got a bottomless pit to the accounts and are writing vouchers from then on and don't no longer use fiat currency of trade or any other instrumentality of trade because all they need is their signature? Like you see a lot of so-called wealthy hybrid Europeans have been doing. They don't even carry credit cards. They use their signature, and they pretty much travel the world. That's only for the elite. But yet, by birthright, that's your right, which has been denied.
So if they go to GMEI utility and they get that list.
Yes, that's part of the allonge. Part of the allonge.
Oh, that's not the entirety of it.
It would be every trade that's made on that marriage certificate, birth certificate, including those who've given up their physical life.
Like
those
my mother.
They continue. The allonges would be all of the attached trade history attached to that original instrument. All fractionalized trade, which would be a book on everyone. So for the people who even think that they've even captured the so-called birth certificate are deluding themselves. That whole promise with the commercial acquisition of holder in due course with the captivity of the birth certificate. This is what happened to that European daughter, Trochet. I think it was a year or so ago.
No, it's been about three
about
years.
3 years.
Yeah.
She so-called perfected the UCCs and so-called thought she got control of that birth certificate. And they took her to a private ecclesiastical court and tried to hide it, tried to disappear her.
They took her to hell.
If it wasn't for the fact that so many people were conscious and becoming more and more conscious, they would have disappeared her. But let this be known. She did not get a hold of that secured instrument and become holder in due course. That's a guarantee.
What about the handful that we hear?
And it's not her fault. That's not a charge.
But what about the ones we hear said they actually have, or are they?
How come now you hear the ones that the so-called actually have? Now hold on. Now name them, count them on your fingers, and show any instrument of this bottomless pit account where they signed their signature, and show me where they're not still using fiat or other instrumentality or some kind of cryptocurrency to trade with. Name one. Including the ones that's selling the processes to people. Hold on. That's like this. Here we are, right? You got the farm now. Oh, I got a hold of the farm, right? And you got all the wheat and the corn, right? And then, but everybody's supposed to visit you, got to bring a peanut butter sandwich and bring a bushel of wheat. You don't want to see no bushel of wheat. You're trying to get rid of the ones you got. If you got access to the bottomless pit account, and they call vouchers, really, when it's supposed to be, when it boils down to it, you're supposed to be able to buy your autograph alone, transfer any right of property, because you yourself will be held as the bank based on your birthright, based on the birth certificate. And I'm not saying that that's not right, because that's morally right how things supposedly operate. But they disallow it under a color of law. That's the criminal activity that's been ongoing with the operatives of the United States Corporation Company. Therefore, people who have a right to travel, they've been forcing them to get passports. They've been forcing them to get licenses. They've been forcing them to get marriage certificates. They've been forcing them to get jabs in their arms. And the people have been cooperating rather than refuting them, haven't they? Meaning you have more who have been cooperating and less, although it's growing now, more who have been rebutting them, which is now becoming their problem with the bonds around the world, because no one's buying their treasury bonds. They're having a feedback loop, which we've been telling the people for the last 15 years. So now you have, rather than saying that the nations of the earth are no longer buying U.S. treasury bonds, they're saying that we're having a trade problem with China and India and Russia. Yeah, right. No, what's happening is that them UST bonds backed by the private popes and clergy's Federal Reserve note, which is known as quote unquote private commercial paper coming under the category of fiat is not being accepted in trade around the world. So now it's becoming what you call domestically accepted and rejected outside. So now you have hyperinflation, which is what? Corporate state robbery of the people, which is what's going on now, and it's accelerating. So therefore, all of us should be about the business of restoring our right of estate, shouldn't we? That's where our efforts should be. It doesn't mean, because you're being realistic and practical, that many things we're doing now while we're in this process of transition is a compromise. Don't call it other than compromise. Don't imply it as other than compromise. But that compromission should be with the intention of correcting it for the next generation, if not for yourselves, which is what we've been saying for years.
This is, I don't know this question, but I won't put it up there because they didn't put it down here like 6 or 7 times. So I'm going to, Islam, can a nationalized father whose child's mother is Black and civil litter mortuus arrange for a de jure Moorish adoption with a competent nationalized willing quote unquote mother to have the child nationalized?
Well, see, because now this is what must be comprehensive. Let's say this from the beginning. This is for everyone in general. The nationality is a birthright.
And
process is only a formal activity to give public notice.
The child is
the consciousness itself and beginning to act on it is national. See, the deal of it is what you have is simply human beings being misclassified for the purpose of presenting them as stock and as surety for a private trading company known as the United States via its subsidiaries. Nationalization is a divine right that already exists but has been interrupted under escheat operations. So therefore, the first principle of nationality or nationalization is consciousness. All other activities is just a formality to let the world know. See, so the honor of your mothers and fathers is divine. It's in the blood. The process is only because of what you would call the necessity of countering assumed claims that are already out there under the straw. And this is back to assumed jurisdiction that we're talking about. Whether you're talking about the birth certificates, the marriage certificate, or other instrumentalities that the corporate operatives of the corporate state are claiming to own your rights or your body or your estate or your liberties, and thus they are FOFR, and that all entries into the Sister QV trust must be made through them, as the being is held as a ward or state ward and incompetent, also known as a minority. You know, so when one understands what these grammars mean, you consciously counter them.
So here's a question again. I'm thinking from the same person who asked about the pension.
The pensions are gone. Let's
right, but as it is though, if they're still going to give them something saying the pension and Social Security benefits, what documents are needed, and who will I submit it to? Isn't that old business?
That's old business.
And
take
you
care of it.
In your
take care of that business because it's a corporate entity.
In your straw.
They already have that.
So just don't fool with that.
And it's not your straw. That is
I said in the straw that they create.
Remember, the Sister QV Trust is what they're operating on. They're operating on via contract. The deal of this, in fact, the pensions are gone. This is again why they're doing the stimulus, to cover up the fact so that the public don't come after their necks. And I don't mean next, N-E-X-T. I mean N-E-C-K-S.
Next.
Because the last large financial operations of the United States corporation company that they had control of is the Federal Employees Retirement Pension Fund. That's gone. So if you're talking about thinking long term with the so-called pension, don't hold your breath. So we all need to be about the business of restoring the estates. All of us. Reversion of estate is part of nationalization. And when you nationalize, that's already implied politically. They know it, even though people who nationalize don't know it. This is another reason why you see so many people talking against it, who really know the effect that it has. You know, someone who knows the effect of it are very sensitive. That's why they are, because it's killing the stock market. And the masses don't know that it's tied directly to the stock market. They think that the products that are produced, the cars and everything like that, are really what affect the stock market. No, they're reflections. The trade of material goods is a reflection of the bonds that back all of that trade up, which are marriage certificates, birth certificates, etc. Human trafficking.
But what is their expectation, has been their expectation all along, or what have they received and gained as a result of using birth certificates and marriage? No, what have they, how have they gained materially based on putting us under their, you know?
This is what has gained. Remember, the fiat categorized instruments, which is not limited to federal private commercial paper. That's the lawful term for what you call Federal Reserve notes, debt notes, etc. It's the marriage certificates and all the other instrumentalities. It has allowed them to steal people's estate and labor under the guise of paying them when they've never paid them. But because the people believe they were getting paid, the value is psychological. It is based on trust and blind faith. And that's all. Once that leaves, it dies. However, in the process, it has allowed them to escheat your estates. As an example, and this is fact. This is fact. This is fact. The Federal Reserve Board, who are members of the Roman Curia, who are answerable to the Board of Trustees, known as the Congress and the Senate for the United States Corporation Company, to the Circle Church and Chancery members, that would be the lawyers, attorneys, and esquire, who are answerable to the Queen of England and the Lords of London, etc., which will include many of those members, who are answerable to the Pope, who controls the global world trust, which is peopled with what is known as Sister QV trust, that are instrumentalities that represent the owned souls of every human being on earth, claimed by the Pope of Rome under the Spanish Inquisition. So what it is they have been stealing the resources of the world by simply printing private-owned vouchers known as Federal Reserve notes that go into the reserve of other nation states that buy U.S. Treasury bonds. So they've been getting all material goods for absolutely nothing and making you work for it, and then lighting cigars with $100 bills, and you're thinking they're rich. No, that's candy wrapper paper for them, but it's money for you only. Then they go with suitcases to different districts. As an example, Wilmington, Delaware, as an example. They will go to someone like Senator J.B. years ago and put a briefcase full of Federal Reserve notes. He will designate through Chase Bank or some other area, and they will go in targeted neighborhoods and buy up property for nothing. What they bought is the labor and the estates of people for generations. That's the benefit. They've been getting something for nothing. They've been stealing or cheating people's estates with Federal Reserve notes, which are nothing more than printed trash coming from the dump. with ink on it that has no backing whatsoever, but has the full faith and trust of an ignorant people who don't know that they're under occupation and they have lost their estates for generations under its steep. And they're sitting around talking about whether there's gold or silver and don't even understand. That's part of the argument, but it isn't the issue, never was. They're still under the illusion that these people are their government. They're still under the illusion that the United States is the country. They're still under the illusion that the agent members of the different agencies have authority to tell them to do this, that, or the other, including take a jab in their arm. And they've been cooperating, giving up their estate, and that's called abandonment of estate, and it's also called consent. And that's what's been going on. We're trying to get them to start using their intelligence and recognize that the hybrid Satanists have no power except what we keep giving them. And this is what happens when you have conscious people over the years who have been trying to help the people. They would murder them to coerce the rest of the people to keep consenting to what is a known fraud. And then they keep saying, they made me do this, they made me do that. Well, that's a yes and a no at the same time. We keep consenting. And then we keep following what you call people of color, which are usually called black Negro leaders, who keep telling these people, well, you can't eat the sandwich unless you consent. They're encouraging the ignorance without explanation, sending it to the next generation. This is what has happened. And so until the people stop serving Rome or giving Rome authority that they do not have, that they never had, it's a matter of trust. It's not a matter of authority. It's a matter of trust law. And soon as you apply to them, you have applied or said they are your or they are your fofer. Now, this is back to the grammar.
What's a fofer?
A fofer is a feudal word for a trustee. And that's